Alright, everybody, welcome back to Armies on Parade. Today we're doing something a little bit different. Marcus and I are here, and we're going to be talking about Mechanized Assault, a detachment within the Astra Militarum. We're going to be looking at a couple sample lists, and we're going to be discussing tactics while we look at the Army, and we're going to talk deployment. Marcus, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Marcus Keogh. I was a previous top 100 Warhammer player on the ITC, mostly for Imperial Knights. I was the best Imperial Knight player for about 6 months, give or take, at some point in ninth as well. But as far as Guard goes, I love Guard. I don't get to play them very often because they are typically very, very good. And it's not quite the thing when you're playing with friends and stuff that you want a completely broken army. It's not 100% broken. We are post Eldar and Grotmus at this point. We have not seen a point update truly, so they're very good right now, and I believe they will remain good for the rest of 10th edition with the rules they have been given. So I play Guard a lot behind closed doors, and I just don't get to play at events because it would be a bit mean for me to go to my local RTT and bully people with it because it would be bullying.
Yeah, for a lot of armies, a lot of different places you play, if you're playing the best faction all the time, it's not as fun for you, and it's definitely not as fun for your opponents either. So,
Yeah, if you play guard well, there isn't much you can do about it. I'm still testing them a lot. Just make no mistake, I'm playing guard. It's a matter of like driving on the track's different than taking it on the street. It's
if you're a guard player and you've been playing since like 3rd edition and all you play is guard, enjoy your time in the sun. Guard have been good
oh
the
yeah,
past 3 years. They've been a really good army for a good stretch of that, but hey, these rules are what GW gave us. Play with your army and play with your rules. Maybe pull some punches if you're playing with friends just for the sake of keeping those friends. But hey, if you're trying to win something, if you're going to a GT or you're going to something that's hyper competitive, then there's no shame in bringing an army like the Astra Militarum currently are, where they're, in that upper echelon of factions.
and I believe mechanized is one of those that is people don't understand that it's very good, but it will feel good to play against. There's a lot of stuff that's gonna die pretty easily, so your opponent, will feel like they're doing something. It's not a table your opponent in the drop turn like Bridgehead, and it's not. It's a hyper skew list, but it's not a skew list built around 2-up armor saves and being able to do stuff. It still has some weaknesses that guard naturally have, which is a good thing. It just has a lot of mobility and a damage point that guard kind of need to do the damage they do. It has everything you need. It just isn't in excess.
And in our current state of 40k, if you're trying to play guard and you're tired of playing bridgehead or you're tired of moving hundreds of models around and maybe you want to play a less mean list, then maybe Mechanized Assault is the detachment for you. Leading off from that, let's jump into the sample list and take a look at what Mechanized Assault might look like. So, Marcus, why don't you run us through what this army is trying to do?
So mechanized assault is a lot of people would probably say isn't as strong as hammer or bridgehead. I would say easily the two best. I think it's up there for the most part. The big thing that I like about mechanized is there's not a really bad way to build it. It is take your transport, put your good stuff into it, have that stuff do more damage, have that stuff be a lot faster.
So the main thing that Mechanized Assault gives you, its detachment rule is +1 to wound whenever you disembark from a vehicle. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's just a big buff when you're dealing with a lot of volume of fire weapons. Las guns become a real threat. Plasma and melta guns are now actual anti-tank weapons. It really kind of skews the dice. The enhancements are a little lackluster. A lot of times you're not just going to take any of them. Like, there's stealth, there's some other cute stuff, but in reality, that detachment rule is your main thing, and then the stratagems are kind of what bring it up. A
What
lot of tricksy stuff.
what are the notable stratagems for Mechanized Assault?
For 1 CP, reroll hits and wounds after a unit gets out of transport, if they're shooting something on a point.
What's that called?
That is called clear and secure. So essentially, you turn a unit into a Scion unit. Luckily, if you can put Scions as attachment, they're still really good because they're still getting access to the +1 to whom, similar to Bridgehead. They just have to be in either a Chimera, a Taurox, or a Taurox Prime. They're not as good in this attachment as they are in bridgehead, but this detachment buffs everything that's in a transport a lot, so it allows you to play a different game completely, essentially. You don't have to worry if your opponent decided to bring 3 infiltrators, and you can't deep strike within 12 of those units. There's a lot less counterplay to an army like this versus bridgehead. You see in this list, I have 8 transports. Transports are amazing. They play the game well. They make speed is the most important thing in 40k, and it just is everything.
So let's talk about the list from the top to the bottom. You have the Tempestus command squads here. Why don't you tell us why you chose those?
So for 130 points, you get a 10-man Science Squad. For 140 points, you get a Science Squad as a 5-man and the Tempest Command Squad that goes with it. So for a 10-point upgrade, essentially, you get the same number of special weapons. You also get sustained hits, and you get another plasma pistol. And more importantly, you get the Medikit, the revived D3 models. So
What does the smoke grenades enhancement do?
just gives stealth. This list had a few points. Like I said, none of the enhancements are amazing. You don't mind paying for them if they're particularly good, but oh no, I'm sorry. Yeah, stealth and cover if they're within near transport. Just nice for 10 points.
What about bold leadership?
That is sticky, so that one's pretty solid. It's pretty expensive. You could easily turn both these enhancements into, say, a commissar if you really wanted to, just for another unit to do stuff. But they're far from bad.
When you say it's sticky, they gain sticky objective.
Yep. The long as they control it, they can move off it, and they'll still remain under your control.
Gotcha. What about the Rogodorn tank commanders?
The Rogodorn tank commanders are you're going to see in a lot of lists. They are the big upgrade that the Codex gave us is we have another tank commander, and it's Rogodorn. So for 30 points over the typical tank commander, you get just a better vehicle in every way. You don't get to shoot on death like the other tank commander, but it's T12. It has an extra 5 wounds. It has a gun that has 72-inch range. The side guns kind of add up to be about the same. Both of them probably take multi-meltas. Las cannon, probably a little bit worse than the pulverized cannon, but the oppressor cannon is a very good main gun that you want, especially for what that thing wants to be doing, is sending out orders. Especially in this list, they can order your transports, so extra 3 inches of move is probably what they're going to take every time.
Is that primarily what they're doing, is saying move to your Toroxes or Torox Primes and then shooting, trying to kill?
Yep, that's the big upgrade from this Codex is 2 orders now, so they can order themselves and launch a Torox. Because that's another thing over Bridgehead this has is you can kind of play at a different pace. There's no drop turn. There doesn't need to be a go turn if that's not what the game calls for. There's just a lot more flexibility in play, and the Dorn commanders really lead into that.
So are the Dorn commanders typically ordering themselves with take aim?
Yep, they're getting take aim, or giving themselves plus 3 inch move to get those angles. So if you're adding 3 inches to your move, that's an extra 3 inches your opponent now has to consider when they're trying to hide. That's angles you can cut that you really wouldn't be able to do. You're going to be a lot less effective shooting, but the difference between not shooting and shooting doesn't really matter if it's worse shooting. Shooting at all is a lot better than not.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they support the transport plan. They themselves are just good units. Their ability is they reroll a hit, a wound, and a damage, which is just Guard don't have, well, they used to not have that much access to rerolls. Still, the tanks don't have that much, so point for point, they're really expensive. They are 265 points apiece, and we could see them go up potentially more. They're good, but they're not gonna table your opponent. They're just really beefy.
Gotcha. Cadian shock troops, are these just here to hold the back objective, or?
Yep, just coming back to what we said, their rule is sticky objective, so every guard list probably takes one. You should always take one battle line your troops for missions like raise the banners, and sticky objectives is just good in case you get indirected off, they screen. It's just a good unit.
The rest of this list is devoted to moving up the board, contesting the mid board with strong punching units coming out of Toroxes.
Yep, and there's a bunch of different units that go in there. I have what I kind of like as I'm trying to min-max and get as many units on the board as possible. And you if you want 2 Dorn commanders, you have to make some cuts. Typically, this list you're going to see 6 Toroxes. They are the best transport in the game. They cost 65 points, and if it stopped there, that would still put it up there with some of the best. But it also has one of the rules of units can get out after it advanced, and kind of making it made a normal move. So again, more speed. The things move 12. You can order them +3 for 15, and then they can throw a D6 on top of that, and then disembark unit 3 inches.
With +1 to
That's
wound out of the transport.
with +1 to wound. If there's a stratagem for move that unit that got out of that transport, another D6, and then you're gonna get those angles on that unit, and why not pop a CP for real hits and wounds if they're on a point?
So you have massive threat range coming out of these Taurox Primes, and you can
Yep.
really threaten with the amount of sustained fire you're getting out of your Krieg combat engineers, which are throwing mortal wound bombs, Ogryns, which are shooting people with these heavy grenade launchers, and then Tempestus Scions, which just have a buttload of really good special weapons.
Yeah. We do see Taurox Primes here, which are 25 points more. They do have a relevant buff because I don't believe you have to put just science into them.
What is a
They
Taurox Prime compared to a
is it,
Taurox?
it has slightly better guns, not 25 points better. Big thing is it's Taurox 7 through 9, and it gives it after it shoots a unit, it gives a unit that got out real hits.
That's not
It's nice.
insubstantial.
No, it's a good transport. The Taurox is just a little bit cheaper, a lot bit cheaper. When you're talking dirt cheap units, 5-10 points is a lot. 25 points is a lot.
Taurox right now is 60 points, right?
65. So
65.
it costs the same as a truck and is substantially better. Other than not having open top, it moves 12s, it holds 12. It has a gun that can occasionally hurt something.
T10.
I think it's less than that. It is pretty. I think it might be T8. So it's pretty much a truck in every way. But it has 3-up armor save.
Yeah, that's still good.
Yeah, and they're insane mission play. Like after they dump their unit, those things are gonna be annoying to kill. They're gonna be able to tie up your opponent, make charges, and so they can't do actions. If you have just 8 transports on top of 2 Dorm commanders and 7 to 9 units that get out and do more damage than they should, it's just gonna add up.
So how did you come at this in terms of 2, 3, 3? Why did you decide on that distribution?
A lot of it was just like I wanted to get that second Dorn in there, so it was a matter of there's 4 good units to put in these transports. You have stuff that is great for mission play, but when you have 6 Tauroxes, your mission play is going to be fine. You want what's coming out of there to do substantial damage and cost effectively too, because again you're adding 65 points to the cost of every one of these units to get the damage out of them. So gotta not be the most greedy. So the Ogryns were just a great unit. They are 60 points, so they are the cheapest non-character infantry thing they can go into transport. You have regular heavy weapon teams, but they aren't bad. And if that's what you have, they're not awful. Last cannon's coming out. They just kind of need orders is the issue. Everything here kind of is either Ogryns can't be ordered, so not a thing to worry about. The thing that you could run and kind of instead of them that I don't have on here is the Kazarkin unit. We'll talk a little bit more about there just to talk about it, but staying on topic for the Ogryns, they really take advantage of that 1 CP real hit and wound because they are 9 shots unless they're in rapid fire range, then they're 6 shots each. They are 5-1, damage 2, so they're essentially a heavy bolter. So a 3-man squad, which they take up the room of 3 models each, is why you can't do a 6-man, otherwise they'd be amazing. But their special rule is they also get +1 AP if they shoot the closest target.
So coming out of the Taurox, you can kind of put them wherever you need them to be, and then when they hit the closest unit, they're getting +1 to wound, strength 5, 2 AP, and 2 damage.
Yep, and that's going to be 6 shots each, so 18 shots. And if that unit happens to be on a point, you can reroll hits and wounds as well.
That's 1 CP to reroll hits and wounds?
Yes, it is the strongest strat likely in the book. Not in the book so much, but definitely in Mechanized. That's your bread and butter. It's kind of why the Scions are there, even though it's a very expensive package. They reroll wounds naturally on a point, and the Taurox gives them real hits. So that unit's kind of doing without, so you can have 6 other units that can get the real hits and wounds.
So Tempestus Scions coming out of the Taurox, they're going to be +1 to wound. If they're shooting something on a point, they're going to be re-rolling hits and wounds.
Rerolling wounds if they're coming out of a Taurox Prime. That's what the Prime does. So if you pay the extra points, you're going to have full reroll. So you're pretty much doing what Bridgehead is doing, except you don't have you don't have to come from Deep Strike.
Gotcha.
And the big thing in the Ogryn thing, like, that's a lot of damage for a 60-point unit. It's a lot of damage.
Yeah, it is. And then finally, we have the Krieg Combat Engineers. So what do they bring?
They were pointed pretty highly for the 5-man. What they were not pointed highly for is the 10-man Krieg squad. So it is 75 points for a 5-man, which you'll see later in the list that there's a reason to take those. For 20 points more, you get 5 more models. Those 5 models just bring shotguns, but that's shotguns are pretty okay when they get +1 to wound. Their whole damage outsource is their mine that goes up on a 3-up and does D6 or D6 +3 into a vehicle. That doesn't need line of sight. Your Taurox is moving almost 20 inches and they're disembarking 3. You're probably going to get in range of whatever they want to throw their once per game mine.
Do the Krieg Combat Engineers also give Scout to the Tauroxes?
They sure do. For 95 points, I'll talk about Kazkin after this. Kazkin also have Scout, which is, especially with this many transports, you're gonna really run out of prime places to put stuff. So having at least 3 or 4 things that can scout is really important to be able to put places if you need to hide your army. In reality, you need to be able to hide your army at least semi-effectively, because there's a lot of very strong shooting army in the game. Scout just helps you do that and not have to be all the way in the back. Yeah, for Krieg, you got Scout 6. So if you get turn 1, you can put those guys almost 30 inches up the map.
And then throw a Mortal Wound Bomb.
Throw a Mortal Wound Bomb, spend 0 CP, throw a grenade, because that's their actual rule. The Mortal Wound Bomb is just a little thing. They have 2 flamers, a bunch of shotguns that are going to get +1 to wound. It's on average 8 mortal wounds if they throw their grenade, so probably getting their points back. Pretty close to being right there. Definitely after flamer and shotgun, and then after that, they're much less of a threat. They get back in the transport, but again, it's mostly the strength 4 shotguns and flamers. Again, they're just a mission play piece after they're the trade, and your opponent now has to deal with them. And eventually it's going to be the point where they just can't match your trading ability.
Or you can just use them to move block. You don't even need to get them back in the transport. You can just throw them into the way of your opponent playing the game.
Well, you might want to get them back in the transport, because we do have some strats that are pretty nice for that. There's a 1 CP strat to, in your opponent's charge phase, get back in a transport if you're within 3 inches.
That seems pretty good.
It's not Eldar, get back in, at the end of any fight phase. We also cost like half what Eldar costs. Yeah, there's some good tricks in this, in all this stuff.
And you can swap in Kazarkin in place of some of these units here.
Yep, engineers, because it's going to take a while to get engineers. They are, in fact, 5-man per box, so Kazarkin can easily take the place of those engineers. Kazarkin can also do mortal wounds. Less, and they're a little bit more expensive. The trade-off is they can now order themselves after they get out of the transport, which is amazing. They have to get a lot closer to throw their mortal wounds, but I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem, this detachment. And then they bring 2 plasma guns, a bunch of AP1 las guns, and 2 meltas typically, plus a long las. So it's a unit I really wanted to include in this list, and after testing it might go back in. If I want to cut a Dorn, I could definitely get 3. Those Ogrins can go somewhere else. Or just get more Chimeras in here. As much as I haven't talked about the Chimera, it's still a fine transport. If nerfs come and the Taurox eventually goes up, you just have a better choice to make between what your transports you want to take, which won't be a bad thing. This list could lose a unit or 2 and still just be perfectly fine. Yeah, Mechanized is just like, whatever you have, put your stuff in transports, it's going to be better. You have tricks. Put some tanks behind them, it's going to be good.
This army, Mechanized Assault being good, Hammer of the Emperor being good, and Bridgehead being good means that we're likely to see a scenario where GW nerfs aspects of the strongest one, which right now is Bridgehead, and then Mechanized Assault becomes the best army, or Hammer of the Emperor becomes the best army, because they're both, I agree, they're both good enough that they'll still have a fighting chance into a lot of armies in 10th edition.
Yep, because hopefully we'll see nerfs that come with everything. Like, all you ever hope is you just don't get hit too hard if you're too good. Guard had a lot of things to fall back on, and then I think Mechanized is a great example of like, all right, well, I don't run Science anymore. We'll get some Kazarkin. We'll put them in the transports. They're 20 points cheaper, so now I have that pays for all the Tauroxes going up.
Yep. Let's jump into Tabletop Simulator and look at deployment for this list, and look at this list and maybe talk about the first turn and some options that you have for strategy. Okay, so we're looking at the deployment for Mechanized Assault. Why don't you talk us through what you've done here, Marcus?
So, as we've said, we have our 3 to 4 units at Scout, so we can take some pretty aggressive lines here. These first 2 units are that are kind of in the open from these angles are our players. Same over here. And the Scout Sentinel, which we didn't talk about, but is just a 55-point unit that scouts, plays the game super well. We got everything kind of staged up. Everything else, for the most part, is pretty safe from being shot turn 1. So, got here everything kind of staged out. We have this pulverizer, able to kind of put its barrel out if it wants to shoot this way. Torox wanted to go this way. And we have our Scions kind of in the back, waiting for their kind of time to rise. Because their damage is coming from a unit being on a point. That's something, so they can wait. We have strat to do that. We have things that are cheaper than them. They are there to kill the big stuff, really. So there's no rush to use them until we need them. And from where they are right now, with minimal 12, 15-inch of movement, this unit can be from here to there with an order. This guy can be from here to there, plus the disembark.
So these two Toroxes are for Scions.
Yep, these would be the primes. So let's put the units there. Kind of represent what's there.
And the rest of these have Ogren and combat engineers in them.
Yep, so the beautiful thing about Scout is you know who's going turn 1 when you get to do it. So if you get turn 1, you can be real aggressive with it. If you don't get turn 1, the key is, as long as you're not playing into a melee army that's not able to charge you because you scout aggressively, the 6 inches, where these guys deployed, 6 inches gets them right into this nook and cranny right here. Scout Sentinel can come up here. Again, this is if you're going second, then you're just staged up and ready.
While remaining hidden.
Yep. And if they don't have any good shooting, you can be aggressive with this guy. You just got to be careful with this corner in particular because they can just move up and shoot. Say if you don't get turn 1, this guy can just slightly back up. Clear this firing angle, figure out where they need to be to see you. Just do that. Now it's safe. Just a lot of what you do when you have scout is you back up sometimes. It allows you to deploy aggressively. As long as you have space for yourself to back up, you throw back behind the building. And then these Ogrins are just here to either play the game or come out and do some big damage. If you really, like I said, if you really wanted to, if you wanted to just cut one Scion squad in a Torox Prime, you could easily turn all these Ogrins into Kazrakan, and then literally every transport could scout. It's a little overkill a lot of the time. It's really just, you're gonna win if you go turn 1, and turn 2, it's a little bit of a wasted ability. So kind of take it with a grain of salt. Usually, like I said, 3 allowed us to have all this stuff in good positioning and allowed this stuff to kind of get in safe spots, regardless of turn 1 or 2.
Let's say you're going turn 1. How would that look?
So as we did, we'd put in line. This guy would scout 6. These guys would almost certainly do what they just did. This Scout Sentinel would scout, I believe, 9 this direction. So 9 or 10. And then now, regardless of the mission, we can be on every point, able to do an action. We have pre-measured that our Dorn can order either these Toroxes. This one probably is not quite in range, but that's fine. If we wanted to make that happen, and we know we're going turn 1, so we don't have to hide, do that, get that guy exactly within 12, now he's in order. So we can easily move this guy, so he's going 15. Roll an advance on him, so it's on the left guy. Going 4, so 16 plus move, so 19 inches.
Yeah, and again, you're right up in their grill, able to get out, shoot, and to really deal some damage and punish some sloppy deployments. What about for these Rogodorns in the back? In addition to moving, taking aim,
So
taking aim.
so we've taking aim, moving up 10 inches. Now this Dorn has this entire flank. We have this one partially covered, but pretty much It's safe here. We don't want to be aggressive because they're source orders. But we're in cover. If you wanted to, you can go this direction, kind of opening up this fire lane and still have this firing lane. On GW1, this is just a good firing lane because it makes them have to respect this. But if they were like really piled up here, this guy could have easily just, moved himself if he needed to, get wholly within this piece of terrain, and now there is a line that exists here. Not just a TTS thing, this line always exists, that this is no longer safe. So if your opponent gets sloppy with their deployment, they're going to get shot turn 1. And they're going to have a bunch of engineers in the face because they're going to, have something within 12 inches here because they have to. Because you're a guard and you have strong shooting, so they have to respect it. And that's another reason the Dorns are here. They are good enough shooting, your opponent cannot just be in the open. You will make them pay if they do that. That's something
So
a lot of people talk about.
the primary goal of the Dorns is, or the general idea of the Dorns is to be a source of orders and also punish sloppy deployments with some good long-range shooting. So
And that's what they do well.
So if you're in a situation where you can, like, whenever you're trying and thinking about where you want to deploy them, you're thinking about sight lines, but you're also thinking about how close they are to the units you want to order. And you also do want to keep them safe as well, because you don't want them to be punished and shot, because then your source of orders kind of goes away.
Yep. And you're not depending on these orders. It is extra 3 inches of movement. They can't order the infantry inside. So the really only other source of orders they have is assign a command squad, which is another reason you take this command squad, because they order themselves. So with real hits, you probably give them, +1 shots in their plasma guns and hot shot las guns, which is just awesome. But like I said, with the rules update, this guy can here put his barrel out, or just clear if he don't want to play that way. That's all fine. So again, putting line of sight on every point with our 2 tank commanders pretty easily. This guy already scouted up if we get turn 1, so even without an order, 12 inches. One of the big things that the engineers do, and especially with the Taurox, so say you throw an advance on this guy, say it's 3. So even without an order, this Taurox is going to be moving 15 inches. It advanced, so it cannot action. But you pop your engineers out. That's a nice say order. Let's plop down. 3 inches away from transport, so have one guy be as far as they can, so anything that would be on this line, be able to get a mine thrown at them. If you need a little bit more movement, you can spend a strat, let them move in their D6. That would, easily get you in here if you want to throw a mine at a certain target. But as the wording of the mine is, it is the start of the shooting phase. It is not a shooting attack. So you throw the mine. Once per use, either might throw a 1 and does nothing. Roll 3, you could do 8 mortal wounds to a tank. But that's most of their damage done. They are now free to play the game. So throw the mine. If you somehow got in range, you could throw a grenade if you wanted to. Because again, that's not a shooting attack. You do have to do all this stuff before you do your action. But after it's done 8 mortal wounds on average, you can do a cleanse. It can do anything at once.
Some sort of action that's going to get you points.
Yeah.
So you're going to do a bunch of mortal wounds, and then you're also going to have the opportunity to get points off this objective.
Mm-hmm. Or even say if your opponent has some models here. The beauty of a 10-man squad is you move this back. You don't have to kill a unit to take a point from it. You can move this up to have these guys get out. If it's just touching here, you just put 12 OC on a point. It's yours now, regardless if you kill that unit or not. So that's a big benefit of that 10-man engineer squad of it. That's an extra 5 OC. So the next thing we're going to show you is how well these units can move block. So again, any unit that has scout, I'm going to move it up 6. Again, if you turn 1, you can be a lot more aggressive. Turn 2, you can hide up, but given an order for moving in 3, it can still advance. So say, again, we just get a 3, so plus 3 plus 3 on 12. Things moving 18 inches. So that's an average roll. Even with a 1, that's 16 inches with a scout. So you are immediately
in
all the
their
way up and down.
face. Yep.
Yep. Get 10 guys out. And this is where that strat to make a move after a unit gets out, super good. So even without that, the purpose of this was to be denying your opponent being able to get on their this objective, which is their safe objective easily. So do that. That's 3 inch this state. They can't move after, but the strat is they can move d6, 2 inches, which is enough to essentially make it. And they cannot move here. Again, we're not a prison army. This unit is dead, but it's not able to throw its mine still. It's not able to throw a grenade more than likely. Shoot if it wants. Cannot charge, which not a bad thing. They don't do any damage. But again, this is your opponent. Again, this is all dead, but this is your opponent. Doesn't matter if they move 20 inches unless they have fly. This is it.
And it is
So this,
dead, right? But they do have to put something into this. It's in cover. It's a combat
yep,
engineer squad. It's 10 wounds, so they do have to put enough shooting into this thing to clear it, just for the
yeah,
purposes of getting on this point. And this Torox is right here too, so you can use this to move block as well,
yep.
further on down the line.
And say they like, oh, we'll set up a charge here. Like, all right, I'll reactive move my Torox 6 inches.
And that's a stratagem, right?
That's all a stratagem. Yep. A lot of really good movement strats in this thing, which by itself can be a little, not in any way lacking. These are all super strong, but it's backed up by a super strong offensive strat and +1 to wound. That's all dead. Again, this unit got to throw 8 mortal wounds. And again, if you drew an action card, it can still move block and just do your 2-inch coherency. It still can do an action, throw its mine, throw its grenade. That unit paid for itself and more than likely got points.
All right, let's wrap it up here, Marcus. Mechanized Assault Detachment. Closing thoughts?
Mechanized Assault isn't the one that's going to be popular right away. I think it is the one that after all the nerfs come down, it has a lot of units to back it up. Even after Tarok sees some points. It's going to be good. It has a lot of tricks. It has a lot of offensive ability, which I think a lot of people aren't going to realize, having played the index, that Combined Arms gave a very noticeable damage buff to that army. Lethal Hits is very strong. It's one of the strongest rules of the game. So unless your attachment's bringing that, some kind of offensive buff, you're going to feel it. Mechanized is bringing all that damage, no issue. With Mech, you're a person that's looking to play the game. You're going to be on point, so you're going to be able to play the mission. You're not putting overwhelming firepower that annihilate a whole army, but you're going to be able to put precision where you need to, and you're going to be able to put models where your opponent does not want them. Unlike Bridgehead, which is all mostly deep strike based, there's no rules other than your opponent physically stopping you from moving. It's really just hard to stop Mechanized, even though it might not bring the raw damage that Bridgehead brings, in the raw super mobility that Hammer brings. The fact it brings both, and the fact it's using really any model you have that goes in transport, in any transport. Chimeras are great, Primes, Tox is of course one of the best units of the game, but even after that gets 10-15 points, you'll be happy to pay it.
All right, well, thanks everybody for listening to and watching Armies on Parade. This has been a rules review of 10th edition Mechanized Assault for the Astra Militarum. We're going to be looking at Bridgehead in this series next and talking about that detachment. Thanks, Marcus, and thank you, our dear listener/watcher. We hope to see you in the next one. Bye.